Yeah, well, I wanted to address something I think the gentleman in the middle said that's false. He said there has not been a market for an Ebola vaccine prior to this outbreak, when in actuality there's legislation called Project BioShield, which the Department of Defense has contracted with numerous pharmaceutical companies to create and stockpile vaccines in case of bioterrorism. It was signed into law by President George W. Bush, 2003. It was just renewed, I believe, last year. And in fact, Tekmira Pharmaceuticals has been developing TKM Ebola, which is a vaccine, since 2010 under contract from the DoD under Project BioShield. So that was false, sir.
Can I answer that?
No, but I want to finish really quick because I do have a question. I just wanted to address that since you said it.
But no, but
that
that's
was a fact.
Factually not correct.
That is true. You can go look it up. You can go look it up, guys.
Could I answer that?
I really would like to ask my question really quick. I just wanted to preface that since you guys have been filibustering for so long.
Look, let me stop this right now. Let me stop this right now. Now, if you wait a minute, everybody. Now, what did I say when I started this gathering? We do want to hear what you have to say, but if you've come to make a statement, there's another meeting for that. Now, you made an allegation that he made a falsehood. Wait a minute. Let's hear his answer to that, and then we'll take your question.
Yes, sir.
So for 4 years at the CDC, I was in charge of the Strategic National Stockpile, which is what those products are being made for. The problem with the Project BioShield is it gives companies money for the early development to see, can you make this vaccine? But then they enter what companies call the valley of death, which means there's no money to get them from that early lab development into clinical trials. And so, yes, there was an early development for an Ebola vaccine, but that vaccine has not been taken forward to the point of manufacture, testing, and then stockpiling, which is what's now going forward. And there are quite a number of products where there was some money for the early development, but they haven't gone forward.
Yes, sir. Could I well, your initial statement was there was no market, and they did begin clinical trials in January. So anyway, I'm done with that issue. Project BioShield, go look it up, Tekmira. So I want to ask actually about the blood transfusions. So we all know that Mr. Duncan, rest in peace, and condolences to his family, did not receive a blood transfusion supposedly because he did not match the blood type of Dr. Kent Brantley. 3 others have received blood transfusions. Just recently, Nina Pham, Dr. Richard Sakra, and also Ashoka Mukpo, who is a journalist who contracted Ebola in Liberia. So there is also an emerging black market in West Africa for the blood of survivors. Why has the World Health Organization not facilitated the use of blood transfusions and the antibodies of survivors, since it seems to have worked 75% of the time, approaching 100% since Nina Pham's condition is improving? That's my question. Thank you.
Now, to me, that's a real question that I have, which is that if it is the case that we've seen some success with regard to the blood of Dr. Kent Brantley, and other people have survived this disease, why do we not ask them for their blood? Do you see what the survivors for their blood? If that is, and I realize that we're not absolutely sure that that's the case.
Well, this is one of the treatments the World Health Organization recommends that people try. And when I was in the treatment ward in Liberia, I saw them giving blood from survivors to patients there. I asked Dr. Brantley today about his blood type and the blood type of others, and he's blood type A positive, and it turned out was a match for 3 of the Ebola patients here in the United States. Mr. Duncan was B positive, and so he could not give his plasma the antibody factor because it would have caused a big reaction. I think, though, the question of why not have a bigger pool so that you have available to patients with Ebola blood types of many kinds is a good one. The challenge is, though, that in West Africa, in Liberia, they can't do any blood typing. And so what they were doing there was giving blood of any survivor to any patient and then treating the reactions that they would have if it wasn't the right blood type.
That should get further study, though, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, that's one of those therapies that definitely should be studied to see, does it help, does it hurt, does it make any difference?
Okay. I believe this gentleman's been...
First of all, thank you for being here. And we are at your mercy. We really are. This is all brand new to our community and to the health community here. I'm a retired fireman paramedic with the city of Dallas. And I have two comments and two questions I want for you. First of all, I think we do need to have a level of fear, but it needs to be an educated fear, and not just one just downplay this. I think this needs to be, we need facts, and we need to develop the right level of fear so that we can take precaution as a society. Two, I don't think it's the time for the blame game. I think we need to stop the hemorrhaging, stop the spread, and there's always time to point a finger as to where did it fail. The question I have is, when you went to Africa, in your protective gear, how did that differentiate from the nurses' protective gear in Presbyterian?
Yeah.
See, that's a great question. I mean, I am curious about that, because I'm wondering why a nurse from this point forward does not have the best protective gear that there is. I mean, maybe they do, but clearly what your procedures were great.
Well, I can tell you, as a journalist, I would love to know exactly what the healthcare workers at the hospital were wearing, and that's not information that's been shared. But I think that there's absolutely no way it should exist that someone here taking care of a patient should have anything less than what we were wearing in Liberia. That just shouldn't happen.
Was it a full body suit or was it pieces?
I mean, I was wearing a full Tyvek suit. I had on top of that leg coverings. My boots went into the Tyvek suit. I had 3 pairs of gloves. I had a big rubber apron. I had 2 types of different hoods. I had a respirator, goggles, and a face shield. It was pretty hard to move in the gear that I had on. But I don't know what is being used here. I know that the initial recommendations from CDC were saying that that wasn't necessary to take care of something like Ebola, that the type of precautions were contact and droplet precautions, and I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that people here should have the same quality of protective gear that the experts caring for Ebola patients in Africa have.
To be a voice for the little guys, the paramedics, the first responders on this stuff, is the fire department notified of the location of these monitoring patients? Whereas if they get a call to that location, is it flagged for the paramedics, and will CDC respond with them to protect the paramedics from here on?
That's a great question. That the Dallas Fire Rescue and the other cities around this area have followed that exact situation, and it goes from the 911 call all the way through to make sure that any of the monitored or risk patients are identified prior to arrival of the EMS.
I've been away for 5 years, so.
It's a great question, but I know they'd been working on those exact protocols because that was a big issue.
Okay. This gentleman.
Thank you. We're here at a town hall meeting. I live here in East Dallas. I've lived here for 32 years. I live in the 5700 block of the M Streets, right near Marquita. I'm down here now. We seem to get conflicting messages about forgetting about the care in the hospitals. I am sure that the hospitals are taking as much care as they can over these patients to make sure that it's contained. But when we hear that the Ebola virus only lives outside of the body for 7 or 8 hours, why is the state of Texas, the county of Dallas, the city of Dallas, the federal government spending millions of dollars to contaminate this stuff, to incinerate it, and then try and ship it to Louisiana to where they won't take it? Am I okay riding the bus? Am I okay going up to the Walmart on Belmont Street, on the M Streets? Are we getting all the facts that we need to know? Because we keep getting conflicting messages from the government that we need to destroy this stuff, and obliterate it, and but we keep getting the message, oh, it's okay after 7 days or 8 days. So why are we getting these conflicting messages?
That's a good question. Let me start with the first part of his, which is Louisiana right, or are we right with regard to the incinerated remains or materials that are being sent to Louisiana? Louisiana doesn't want it, says that it's still dangerous, yada, yada, yada. Are they right?
Well, you know, and I'll be honest with you, that, you know, this is what we're supposed to do, is be honest. And I do think that this has been a big issue, and this has been a very troubling situation, because on the one hand, we're advising about what we say the science is telling us, and yet on the other hand, the very visible aspect that you're referring to about how the cleanup is going, it just seems very conflicting to that. When I've talked to the guys that were doing the hazardous cleanup, which it really, in my mind, wasn't even hazardous cleanup. These are the guys that are used to dealing with oil spills out on the freeways and, you know, hazardous waste and disposal and all those kinds of things. And that's what they do for a day-to-day job. And what they had to do when they went in there, it was they treated it as a complete unknown. So if you're in that line of business, when you're with a complete unknown, they're going to gear up. And that's just what they do. And they're workers, just like, you know, a police officer is going to carry a gun when he or she may not need a gun going into a house. You know, it's just part of the equipment that they use. And then you listen to what they had to do. They were pulling up carpet to remove any risk. You know, and pulling up carpet and, you know, all that stuff with you know, moving things around. I think it makes sense that they took the extra precautions. But I agree with you, this was not the ideal way to watch this all unfold. But again, I still believe that the environmental risk, contamination risk was really not.
I think that, excuse me, I think that what this is trying to make the public comfortable backfiring. For instance, taking the ambulance out of service for several days after it had been decontaminated is going above and beyond what was necessary, but I think it backfired. Taking a plane out of service that had virtually no risk is trying to make the people who are flying on it more comfortable that it's going to be okay, but I think it backfired, like in your situation.
Well, what I'm trying to say is, right now, the whole, on the screens back there, facts versus fear, and I'm not sure, John, I'm going to put it back to you, whether the media or whether the CDC and the government is creating more fear than fact. And
I can answer the media. I can answer the media part of it. Personal opinion, I think a lot of the stuff that you're watching on television today is just absolute garbage. I mean, I see a lot of material that, I see a lot of the material that is on the air, particularly on the cable channels, is absolutely not even remotely close to being accurate. It's just a means of getting you to watch television, and that's unfortunate. And I wish I could say that's not like that, but that's the honest to goodness truth. I mean, you have to get on my little soapbox. You have to really pay close attention in this society, because just because somebody who looks sweet and thinks they know what they're talking about is telling you something, that does not mean it is the truth. It doesn't mean it is the truth. That's why none of those folks are here, and people with PhDs and MDs are here. Again, I want to make this clear. We are trying to identify facts. I'm not telling you everybody here has every single answer. We do not have every single answer. What I am telling you is that, and they'll tell you, if I think that they're not telling you the truth, I'm certainly not going to let them get away with it. Particularly when I heard this gentleman ask the question about, and we heard that there is no market for it. Well, what that pointed out is that we really are our brother and sister's keeper, but for some reason somebody's decided we can't make enough money off of it, and so now the rest of us are going to have to sacrifice it. That's what I heard. That's what I heard in your question. So I hope that got to what you have. Yes, sir.
Just one final comment. That's what I think everybody wants to hear. If you don't know the facts, tell us we don't know, and we're still trying to figure it out. Is it safe to ride a bus? Is it safe to go to the grocery store? If you don't know, at least tell us so we can protect ourselves.
That we know, and it is safe.
It's safe to ride a bus, correct?
It's safe to ride a bus. It's safe to go anywhere in the civilian world. You just don't want to go and touch an Ebola patient who's very sick. If you don't do that, you are safe and your children are safe in school. We know that. We don't have to equivocate.
Sir, do you have?
My question revolves around at what grade of temperature do you actually become symptomatic and become infectious? And the reason why I ask that is we've been told that Mr. Duncan was returned away from the hospital at 103-degree temperature. And then I heard on the CNN today, they're saying, well, Miss Amber, I forget her last name, Amber had only a 99.5 temperature when she boarded the plane, and that's okay because it has to be like 101. So it doesn't make sense to me. Mr. Duncan at 103 is not infectious and symptomatic, and his close family members aren't catching it in that closed compartment. But then we have somebody who says, okay, she's 99.5, that's okay. So where is the science?
Is there a magic number that you're looking at? I mean, because I heard the same thing that, you know.
There's an agreed upon number that statistically 100.4 is the dividing line. People with early Ebola typically present with temperatures above 100.4, and to some extent that's arbitrary, but it's a good rule of thumb, and that's what's used in epidemiologic investigation of these things.
And then my second question.
Yeah, well, let me follow up just one thing. And the reason for it is when temperatures are below 100.4, it's much more common for the temperature to be something else. When it's above 100.4 in the right circumstance, it's much more likely that it's going to be Ebola. And so that's why that's a good rule of thumb. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The second part of that question is, the young lady said, the news has come out, said the CDC said that Amber could get on the plane. My question is, in Africa, if she had presented in Africa and she had a fever and she said, I've been around Ebola patients, she wouldn't have been allowed to fly, but yet the CDC here has not instituted any policies that our airports are not checking this. So she could not have flown from West Africa anywhere else, but she could board a flight in Cleveland, fly to Dallas. That's troubling to me.
Should the CDC start to adopt some of the policies that we're seeing elsewhere?
No. And the reason for that is we don't have an epidemic of Ebola in this country. Well, I know. I believe strongly, and I think all the informed people believe, we are not going to have an epidemic of Ebola because we have an organized health system. We have an organized public health system. If another case comes, it will be identified, and anybody exposed will be surveilled, and it'll be contained, and it will not spread. The conditions in West Africa are completely different than here. So we're not going to have an epidemic. So you don't want to go, doing things that are very disruptive to travel and commerce when there's really no need to do that. We've got one patient who showed up in the community with Ebola, and then 2 nurses who have gotten it in the hospital, and that's it. We have no other cases.
Okay. Can I say very quickly? We had to hogtie Dr. Besser to get him down here, and we promised that we'd only keep him for an hour. I've kept him for more than an hour, and I know for a fact that he has another appointment that he has to make that was in fact planned, I believe, before this event. So can we give him a round of applause, please?
Good to meet you. Yeah, good. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Nice to meet you.
But stay right where you are. That does not mean that we're finished. This gentleman's had his. You've asked your 2 questions?
Yeah, I just want to know if everybody else on the panel feels the same way as this gentleman does it. The CDC should not adopt protocol that we should be. We already take off our shoes, we take off our belts, we take out our wallets. Why aren't they checking like they do in West Africa when we get a flight?
Everybody hear that? Essentially what he said is the CDC, they already make us take off our belt, take off our shoes when we go to the airport. We got to do all these other things. Why shouldn't they go ahead and do some of the other things that they're making people do in West Africa before they get on the flight? And so the question is,
I think, first of all, this happened today, of course, right? And so we're still in the middle of this. And could there have been missteps along the way? Sure. Keeping in mind that this is the first Ebola case that was diagnosed in the United States and the healthcare workers that took care of that first case. I think you make a good point. You know, what else do we need to be thinking of doing? And yeah, I think that there needs to be thoughts of what needs to be improved. Now, we have to be realistic and practical, of course. You know, I think that the reality is that Ebola is not here today. We don't have the risk in the community. But we want to make sure that we do learn from those mistakes. And I think you're right. We should look at what's being done elsewhere. It makes sense.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I've heard again and again that this is the first case in the United States. However, I've also read from news sources that there was another case in July inside the United States, and I feel like we're acting retroactively when we could have been proactive, and I feel that we can be proactive because I go to UNT, and there is a pandemic clause in every syllabi. So why are we acting retroactively when we could have been active? It's not like we didn't know.
Well, I think it's a great question. And look, you know, Robert mentioned this. I think we have to recognize that there is a level of complacency in our world today. And around infectious diseases in general, we've grown to believe we can treat our way out of this. And this is just my personal opinion. But you know, when we talk about the fact that we now have antibiotics and we just take care of things because we can treat them, we're in a lucky time, right, to be able to even say that we can do that. I think that that's added to a piece to this puzzle, and that's a bit of complacency. So I think what you're getting at is that we need to rethink that a little bit. And hopefully this lesson will teach us to be a little more aware that we need to be proactive.
Go ahead. Do you have something else to add?
I'm just saying, so like, over and over again, we're hearing that this was the first case. If this is not the first case, then we need to let people know. Are we just acting this way because Texas is a little bit different? We spread information differently than they say they would in Philadelphia?
Well, I'm not familiar with the case that you're referring to, so I can only speak for the Dallas area and about this first case that we know about the diagnosis.
I have heard again and again what I heard shouted out from the audience, and that is, why do we not go ahead and ban the travel to this country from the countries that have Ebola right now in Africa? Why do you think that's a good idea? Do you not think that's a good idea? I think Dr. Haley's made it pretty clear that you're concerned that might be disruptive.
Well, so far we've had one case imported. Now, the larger the epidemic grows in West Africa, the more likely we'll have another one. Okay? But is it worth shutting down international commerce to a major part of the world which would devastate that country? Remember, this is a poor country. It's a poor African country. They've been enmeshed in civil wars over and over for years. They've got disorganization, but they do have an economy, and they're trying to struggle back. If we put an air embargo on to the United States, it is over. We have destroyed West Africa. Now, do you want to destroy West Africa because we've had one case imported to this country? I think that would be unconscionable, and that's what the decision makers, I think, are weighing. Also, we wouldn't be able to get our healthcare workers who we're trying to ship over there. We're trying to increase the number of people going over there to stop the thing. They wouldn't be able to get over there or be able to get back. So, you know, I think the decision makers have wisely hold the line. Now, you know, here the reason that we're asking